In? Is everyone back?
Please don't talk.
Is everyone back?
Don't talk. Please keep quiet, Reverend Faith. Don't talk, please. Reverend Faith, what's the man's name? Then Robert is not in again. Robert is out. Reverend Faith, Robert is out.
Well, all I can do is call him.
Could you please ring him, please? Is he coming back?
Is everybody back?
Is he coming back? We called him.
He's not picking up. I just hope we haven't lost him as well.
What do we do now?
We're gonna start. We're so late. I just don't know what to say anymore. We just need to start. We've lost most of the audience by now.
Okay, I've got people waiting on YouTube for me.
You've got people waiting on YouTube?
Yes. What do we do? You want
We
to
need
start?
to go live. Yes. If Robert comes back, he comes back. If he doesn't, we need to start. I can't.
All right, okay. I'll go off now. And I'll call you.
Yes, thank you. This is really making me nervous.
Get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight.
Get up, stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight.
Get up, stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight.
Get up, stand up for your rights. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight.
Get up, stand up for your rights. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight.
Get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight.
Get up, stand up. Stand up for your rights. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight.
Hello and welcome to Roundtable exclusive talk tonight on LCBN TV. I am Reverend Faith and I'm happy to be in your presence again on this show. Tonight we are doing an exclusive talk regarding the issues and the recent incident that took place in the US. A gentleman called George Floyd, 46-year-old gentleman, was called by the police and held to the floor for 9 minutes. Those 9 minutes took his life, and he was declared dead at the scene. The people who held him to the floor were meant to be protectors of the society. They wear a badge, and they are called the police. Today, 4 agents have been arrested, and 1 has been charged with manslaughter. Those policemen are now following justice, the justice system of America. But that event has caused a lot of chaos all over the world, and people across the countries in New Zealand, in Germany, and even here in the UK are now protesting concerning the incident or the killing of George Floyd. Today, I have brought a few guests with me to discuss the issues simply because the Black community in the UK has also cried out at the event that took place in the US. Many people have taken to social media to complain about the racism that was shown towards George Floyd, but also the action of the officers as being something that is have been repeated many times throughout the years against the Black community. Tonight, I have with me Pastor Toye Olayinka, who is currently the apostolic leader of a ministry called Doxa Tribe. His church is based in Milton Keynes, and he is a leader with a passion for worship, a leader who desires to bring revival to the UK. He is also the founder and the principal of SLAM, which is a school of leadership and ministry. Welcome, Pastor Toye.
Thank you, Reverend Faith. It's a joy and an honor to be a part of this. Apologies, I sounded a bit funny. I'm just dealing with hay fever allergies. And thank God for your life and for everybody you're working with to bring this up. Is very necessary, absolutely needed. And once again, thanks for the honor to be a part of this.
Thank you so much for joining us. I have another guest with us tonight, and this gentleman is called Ryan J. Bruce. He is well known within the UK gospel industry as an influencer, I will call him. I like to use that word. Ryan is a music industry professional with extensive experience in marketing. He was named in Music Week 30 Under 30 and has been published in the HuffPost, as well as having a number of other as well as having featured in other publications. Ryan launched digital music industry trade publication called musicbeesnation.com, where he currently serves as an editor. Welcome for joining us tonight, Ryan.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. We will be having other guests, I hope, in the next few minutes. We are expecting Robert Beckford, who is a theologian and a BBC presenter, who will be joining us at some point. But tonight, let me start afresh with the questions which provoked a riot and protests all over the world and and especially in the UK. I'm gonna probably start with Brian, who is in the US right now. How are the tensions where you are?
I think, I mean, at the moment, things are extremely tense. You can kind of feel it in the atmosphere and the climate. It's the result of a lot of frustration that's been building up over the years. And I think one of the things a lot of people don't seem to realize is this is not a new or isolated incident. This is not a new occurrence or a new situation. This has been something that's been brewing for years. You know, I think I saw a quote that Will Smith had put out some years ago that said racism isn't, I think he said racism isn't getting worse, it's getting filmed. And so I think the fact that people knew it exists was already a problem. The fact that people were already experiencing it was already an issue. But I think now that we can see it happening in our faces on camera, I think that brings a whole another dynamic to the emotion of what people are feeling, and it's become very intense here now, to the point where they've implemented curfews locally in Los Angeles. I think there's a curfew of 7 p.m. in Atlanta, where I currently am right now. There's a curfew of, I think it's 9 p.m. You know, so it's become a critical situation that definitely needs some redress. But yeah, we're just trying to figure this out day by day, and you know, figure out, okay, well, once the protests are over, what is our next step? Because I think part of the issue that a lot of people are having with the process is, whilst I think it's warranted in the sense of being able to vent some frustration that is, you know, been, like I said, brewing for some time. Protests, you know, in the traditional sense, or when you think of the idea of a protest, the idea is that you ask for something. And I think in order for us to have, you know, or see some real change, once we've finished expressing our frustration, we really need to strategize and think about, okay, well, what are our next steps going to be? What are we asking for? What is going to pacify the situation? And how do we move forward from here?
Wonderful. Well, we've seen some horrific pictures from the US in the last couple of days, or in the last week also, and I believe that that has brought a lot of hurt in the heart of those who have already experienced racism throughout the years as a Black community. And today we're seeing protests all over the UK and other countries. Pastor Toye, what are your thoughts about the UK protests that have taken place over the weekend?
Well, thank you. I think the first thing I would like to say is you can only suppress people for too long. It gets to a point, everything is going to erupt. One thing I know for sure is there's been the same issue in the United Kingdom for a long time, though we've got, you know, we kind of played in a different way, or we call it different names and possibly handle it in different ways. But it's the same issue everywhere. The same racism being experienced in the United States. It's been going on in the United Kingdom, and I think when the news of George Floyd's death came out, and the video of his execution, because that's just what he is. I think it sparked a new strength on the inside of people, and it sparked a new anger at the time, because you see, when you've been suppressed for long, initially you'll be afraid. You'll be afraid to speak your mind. You'll be afraid to stand up for what you believe. But it gets to a point where you get pushed to the wall, and there's no other place you're going to go to but to press through the wall. And that's what is happening in the United Kingdom. I've seen a few people say certain things that really just don't make sense. Oh, these happen in the United States. How come you're protesting in the United Kingdom? For me, I'm just like, it doesn't make sense, because number one, we're not talking about a goat here. We're talking about human life. Number two, racism is very much alive in the UK. They might, and to a great, some extent, some of the racists we have in this country might not have been so bold to pick a gun and shoot someone. But the truth of the matter is, or the fact of the matter is, if you watch the progression in the last 5 years or thereabout, or 6 years, you'll realize that people are getting bolder to let you know they don't like you. They don't like your color. They don't like your face. They can't stand you. So I think it's the old protest is very much needed because of one thing. We've leave and function in a system that until we sometimes shout, they don't hear us. So yeah, I'm not into the any sort of this what do I call it breaking of the laws in the process of protesting, but I totally support people going out there and making it known that you know what, you can't keep treating us like animals anymore. We're not animals. You're not going to keep profiling us and put us at the back of the queue. We're human beings just like you with the same quality and with the same essence.
We have a quote from Martin Luther King that says, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." And I believe that injustice anywhere is everywhere. And the response that we have seen in the UK is a proof of that today. I want to ask you about the two of you, Pastor. I'll start with Ryan, your experience in the UK and in the US in terms of racism. Is it worse there than it is here, or is it similar, or is it a little bit more hidden in the UK than it is in the US?
I mean, Pastor, do you want to go first, or?
Oh, Ryan, if the question goes to you first, yeah.
Oh, to me. Okay. All right.
It goes to you first, bro.
I think part of the challenge with that question is the idea of even comparing racism in the first place. I mean, if somebody dies because they got beat up, or if somebody dies because they got shot in the head, I think the issue we're still dealing with is that the fact that they were murdered. And so, spending most of my life in the UK and living in the US, been able to see the scope of the different forms of racism, but I don't think it necessarily changes what the undercurrent of the situation is. And I was saying to people on Facebook the other day, I think part of what makes me proud as a Black British man, seeing the protest in the UK, because a lot of people are saying what you were saying, Reverend Faith, in regards to, well, why are people protesting in the UK? Or Pastor, I may have been you. Why are people protesting in the UK? It's not a UK issue. I mean, we've even seen some of the major pastors in the UK make statements in that regard, in regards to not kind of separating themselves or separating themselves rather from that issue. But the reality is racism and white supremacy is a global problem. And so, it makes me proud to see people in the UK standing in solidarity with people in the US. You have, I think since the election of our current president, you've had a lot more of the overt racism than we've had perhaps in the past 10 or 15 years over here in the United States. But also, I do want to say in regards to that, a lot of people are looking at the current administration as the reason why racism has had such an uprising in the past recent years. But the reality of the situation is we were experiencing police brutality in the US under President Obama. And so this is not a Trump issue. This is a systematic issue. And unfortunately, Trump and his rhetoric has been able to amplify. And so, when you look at racism in the UK, we don't have the same level of police brutality. And that's partly because the gun culture in the UK is very different. We don't have, guns are not a part of our culture in the same, in the UK the same way it is out here. But you still have very, very evident racism that is able to impact, how much money you're able to make, where you're able to live, how long you go to jail, what kind of crimes you go to jail for versus those of your, Caucasian counterparts. And sometimes in some cases in the UK as well, whether or not you live or die. And so the reality is, even though it rears its head in different forms, it's the same beast that we're having to attack here. And so, it's good to see the protest in the UK. I've seen protests as far as Switzerland, because I think in order for a global issue to be able to address, we need to have a global outcry and a global sense of unity.
Pastor Toye, you've seen the protest in the UK, and I think it shows that people all over the world have felt the pain and the wounds. But I want to touch on what it means. Oh, hello, good evening, and thank you. Welcome, Bishop. Thank you for joining us this evening, and I'll be coming to you soon. The wounds of the past have been one of the reasons why I believe people are now protesting in the UK. And before I move on to this, I want to ask the question, are we still suffering racism in the UK? That is one of the questions that people were asking on social media. Is really racism still happening in the UK, that we need to be involved with what's happening over the pond? And that question will be going to Pastor Toye.
All right, thank you once again. Yes, I want to say straight up, racism is still very alive in the UK. Let me share. I kept quiet for a while. I'm not even sure if I've shared part of this with my wife, but interestingly, part of the things. So one of the things that I've experienced when we started our local church last year was to have people come around. And when I say people, I'm going to make it very clear. These are not blacks, these are not Asians, these were white folks. They came around to sniff us out. One of them eventually told me that they came around to sniff us out. Interestingly, when we started, before they came physically to sniff us out, I got a message from a man in Scotland asking who we are, where do we belong, what authority are we under, this and this and this and that. To the best of my own knowledge as a Christian or as a person, if you don't have a relationship with someone, you don't demand accountability from them. So I found it very strange because the message came to me, and I thought to myself, what is the problem here? And interestingly, another thing we experienced was to have a white person literally. We have a community page of churches at Milton Keynes. We posted on it for one of our upcoming events, and this person flipped. Why are we having another church in Milton Keynes? Do we not have enough church in Milton Keynes? Why did you join other churches? And she went on YouTube as well and left a comment, which I deleted and on our page. And I thought to myself, this is what I said to her. I said, I know the way a lot of these Muslims roll. You're never going to come on social media platforms and find Muslims attacking one another, saying, why are you building another mosque somewhere? Why is it always us who would do this? But you see, when I look more critically into it, I realized it wasn't just a Christian problem. It wasn't really a religious problem. It's a color thing. Because I went for a leaders meeting at some point where we were told to connect with other leaders, hold hands, and pray for revival. And pray that the Lord will impact the land and all that. And I raised prayer points, and I noticed that while we were praying, the prayer that these other people were raising was actually countering what I was praying. And it was so cold. They wouldn't even hold my hand. We were asked to hold hands. They wouldn't even hold my hands. They held, the person who had held one of my fingers. And I thought to myself, why do you do this? How do you expect revival when there is disunity? How do you expect revival when you think somebody is lesser than you are? I've seen cases where, where we see, I grew up in a very quiet neighborhood back home in Africa. The same thing with my wife. So we've got this thing about living in quiet places. So we live in a village at the moment. And I realized that a number of times when we moved to maybe the first village we're going to move to, people were looking at us, and I've even had someone ask me, what are you doing here? Why are you living here? And even where we're currently living, and you see the attitude they give to you. You greet them, they don't respond to you. You show some warmth towards them. They just overlook you. And it's not just that, but in different places. And you find it at work. I find it at work where someone who is not as qualified as you are is being placed over you, and you can see this person hasn't got really any clue about the job the position they've been given and the responsibilities they're meant to carry out. But just because it's not you don't share the same skin color with them, they just feel we make you a little bit less than you are. Another experience that I've had was I have told a police off in this country. I told him off because I was stopped. I was driving something. This was years ago. I was driving some years ago, and I got stopped. And they made some checks, and they were like, "Oh, we have to make further checks. Go with us." I said, "No problem." Go to the station, and I was taken into the station. They took the keys from me. I needed him to get something from me in the car. And I said, "Could you please help me do this?" And he started speaking to me rudely. I stopped him and I told him off. And you know what baffles me? What I experienced, what baffled me was, this guy could not help it. He had to say, "Oh, I didn't know you were that educated."
Really?
And I thought,
oh my God.
I'm telling you, I didn't know you were that educated. When he left where we were standing, his older partner said to me, "Oh, did you grow up in the United States?" I said, "What does that got to do with what we're talking about?" So I said, "So you automatically believe that because I am black, I've got no brain, I can't communicate, I can't speak right, I can't make my mind up." So you see, he's very much alive. And this is the last one I'm going to possibly cite before I let you move on. I really try not to say this, but while all white folks are not racist, a whole lot of them that are racist, the funny thing about them is they have this way of dealing with you where you can tell them A, when they get to someone else, they will say, "Oh, well, he was kind of thinking, or he was saying that he is able, I'm not so sure." And you're there when that kind of situation becomes, let's say, a little bit let's say it becomes a little bit, gets to a point where you need to be questioned and all that. You start wondering, but I told you this point blank. You went ahead and say something else. And you realize that, okay, he's not ignorant. It wasn't like this person did not understand you. They just got this thing that, you know what, you can't tell, no matter how much you try to be plain and straightforward and friendly, they just feel, no, you're not part of us.
I think we need to, we'll come back to this in a minute, because it's something that I was discussing with someone else today. Why is it that our counterpart, and I'm going to bring this to Bishop Mark, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Tonight we've shown at the beginning of the program your video that you have released to ask the church to be more active and to be engaged in this in the injustices or racial injustices that are going on at the moment. But before I go into that, I want to link this to Pastor Toye's point, which is that our peers, the white people in general, do not feel that they should be engaged or they should be involved in this. And we have seen from leaders in the UK, and I wouldn't want to name names, but we know, or we've all seen the video that came out of Hillsong's live stream this week, where the leader was saying that he shouldn't be involved with things that are happening across the pond because it does not relate to the UK. And my question to you, Bishop, is why is it that the white churches, or the churches dominantly or predominantly led by white congregations, do not feel like they should be involved in this fight against racial injustice?
Thank you so much for having me on. We had a bit of a struggle in the beginning, but we're here.
You're here.
And thank you for inviting me to the show. It's a very good question. Why did I have a struggle? I think there's a slight embarrassment because they have not empathized. They sympathize. And we've got to move away from being sympathetic and empathizing. And I think that's the reason it brings up a lot of embarrassment. And they maybe feel they're very much attached to what's happening historically. But I think people first, and I would say, if it doesn't make sense being a good Christian if you're not a good human being. And I think our churches need to be more realistic and more in touch with the human side of people's pain. Once we refuse to be in touch with people's pain, we are dismissing it because we're saying it happened to you, we just sympathize. And I think that's the reason why people are not getting involved. They will just sympathize. We're saying you need to go the extra mile and empathize. Get in my shoes. Know what it felt like when that word was said to me and my child. Once the pastors, our counterparts, begin to have a spirit, I'm saying it, a spirit of empathy, then the whole language change. And so maybe that's what they need to do. And sometimes their leadership may not reflect people of color. And so therefore that dialogue never happens. And you just don't setting up a class. I would advise the ministers to move away from being sympathetic, empathetic.
And empathetic. I'm looking at some of the leaders across the pond in America who stood up this week. We're very proud to see Stephen Furtick, Mike Todd, John Gray, who took on used their platform this last Sunday to talk about the issues of race, and used it as a point of education for the congregations and also for the pastors. How was this received by the churches in America, Ryan? How was the fact that those major or mega known, I would say, pastors and preachers taking the side of the congregation and empathizing with the Black community? How was it received over there?
I think it's just the first step in repairing the relationship between the white church and the Black church. Martin Luther King said that the most segregated time in the United States happens to be 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Unfortunately, in 2020, that's still the truth. There is much more diversity in the workplace, my personal workplace, and the workplace force in general, than there is in the church. And so in order for the church to really affect change, I think there's going to have to be a lot of healing that takes place. And I think that's part of that healing is having some of these leaders speak up and speak out, from white leaders to Black leaders, because this is not just about Black leaders speaking out or white leaders speaking out, because both of these voices at this time are just as important as each other. Because the reality of the situation is that every one of these leaders that you mentioned have Black members, they have Black people.
Yeah.
The book of Isaiah in chapter 1 says that learn to do good and seek justice. And then it goes on to say that you ought to also correct oppression. And so to separate Jesus and Christianity from the idea of justice really is disingenuous to not only your faith, but your humanity as a person. And to your point earlier, the question in regards to, the video that we all saw and the fact that it came out and why a lot of these leaders feel the need to sort of separate themselves from this conversation really is an ironic conversation and an ironic ideology when you look at the idea of a lot of these churches and charities that decide that they don't have to get involved or speak out about international issues, but they will speak a lot about the international charity work that they do across the pond. They have no problem telling you about the fact that, they saved so many children in Africa, because I think a lot of the times they have they take a more comfortable position in being a white savior than they do speaking to the issues that are affecting their members in their own backyard. And so I really think this is a time for the church to take charge of this conversation, because civil rights has always been an issue, or a movement rather, that the church has led. Martin Luther King was a preacher, he had a congregation. Even if you look at a lot of the other great, Frederick Douglass, a lot of these guys, Marcus Garvey, their faith is really what led the charge. And so I think there's a lot of disillusion in millennials right now that are looking towards the church and looking for leadership, someone to say, okay, guys, this is how we're going to move forward. Because I think in past situations, unfortunately, I think the church has been way too silent. And so I think it is a great step to see so many leaders speaking out that have never spoken about this issue before, from white to Black, Asian, whatever. And so we're going to need to see more of this. We're going to need to see more of this speaking out, but we're also going to need to see what the next steps are. So now that you've spoken about it on social media, how are you going to play your part in leading this charge? Because it's easy to make a statement, but real courage is making a difficult move to actually stand on the front line and say, hey, you know what, we're not just going to talk about it, we're actually going to be about it.
So, Pastor Toye, how are we going to take charge in the UK? Because it's an issue that it is dating back to the civil rights, but for us here, we have a different heritage when it comes to immigration of Black people, whether it's through the Windrush or through the African arrival onto Europe. And we said that the murder of George Floyd is what reopened the wound of racism that our forefathers and even our children today are still experiencing. And yet the churches in the UK are being silent about the issue or not comfortable about them. And some of them have clearly explained that they didn't feel that it was a point of discussion for them. How do you think we should address this issue in the UK?
All right. First and foremost, I think it's a bit funny that your pastor in a place and you don't understand the history of the place. I find it a bit bit not too comfortable. I do believe that, you know, if you pastor your place, for you to be able to reach the people properly and lead them right, one of the key things you do is to understand the culture of the land. That involves the history, what they've been through, where they're coming from, what they're still struggling with. So if any pastor who is possibly not Black in the United Kingdom is saying they don't feel the need to address it, I'm so sorry. I have no intent to insult anyone. I think that's a bit, okay, I'm not going to use the word, but that's not okay. Especially if you've got people who are Black in your congregation, you should, and your pastor in the land will leave, you should make the effort to understand their history, so you'll be able to understand how the reason like the way they are right now. And I believe one of the key things we need to do when it comes to tackling this thing as a Church of God in the United Kingdom is we need to get down to running our churches like families instead of companies. In a company, the leader of the company doesn't necessarily have to know you. You're there to work and get paid. The relationship is not necessarily personal. The relationship is not necessarily personal. You're brought in to do something and get paid, but it's not the same thing when it comes to church. And I think one of the things I've noticed over the years, even with the churches in the United Kingdom, is though we try to give ourselves names and tags to say we're a family, a whole lot of us are not families. And I'm telling you from the experiences that I've gathered over the years, we need to start running as families. In a family, when something goes wrong, we don't ignore people. In an ideal, right family, healthy family, we don't ignore them, we don't push them out. We sit down and we listen to them. We listen to them to be able to medicate what the problem is. But you see, when you're running a church like a company, your mind is going to be about numbers. It's going to be about the projects. It's going to be about the money. And that means you don't care. You will not care what happens to people. You won't care what is going on with them. I remember speaking with a church leader a few years ago, and he made a statement that baffles me. And I could understand the reason why a lot of people around where the church building don't like them. They don't like the church. They don't want to have anything to do with the church because the church doesn't do nothing with them. And I'm not saying doing something for them. The church doesn't do nothing with them. And we need to come to the fact that, you know, racism is a system. It's easier for you to kill a person than to defeat a system. If you're going to defeat a system, you will have to embrace a culture. And part of that culture is teaching. And we need to look into that as a church. And when I say teaching, I'm not just saying teach them about how to prophesy, how to speak in tongues, and no. I'm not talking about that. We need to come down from these aisles of wanting to bring people a bogus word that oftentimes people cannot even put into practice, and begin to address social issues and begin to address day-to-day struggles that people in the church have. I remember this, and I'm going to chip it in. I remember the very first time in my life I will experience depression. I didn't even know it was depression. When I said I needed time off the choir to go rest a little bit, I was told, what if you were the so you say you're taking time off? Now I'm telling you, even right now that I'm a leader of a church, if I am tired, if I get tired, if I'm not feeling good, I will find somebody else to stand in because the church is not my property. Well, unfortunately, we have churches where we seem to want to use speaking in tongues to fix everything. No, when I go to Tesco to buy stuff, speaking in tongues will pay for what I've taken. No matter how deep my tongues are, when I get to the till, I will have to use something that is valid and credible on this side of eternity to make payment. So if we're going to be dealing with racism, we need to start sitting down with people and begin to listen to them first. I'm sorry to say this. I think we live in a time right now where we are very terrible with listening. People are terrible with listening, but we need to stop it. I was speaking with a few pastor friends the other time, and I said, we need to stop this idea of just preaching over people, but we don't know how to sit down and listen to them.
I'm going to go back to your I'm going to go back to your point regarding education, because I think it's quite important what we are teaching the flock when it comes to what we are giving them on a Sunday morning. And whilst it was something that was taught in the olden days in the terms of you know, civil rights movement, in terms of even the foundation of the church here in the UK, when it comes to having the white church and the black church, or the start of the start of the Pentecostal movement in the UK, because black people were being rejected from the traditional churches. I'm going to take this to Bishop, because I think you've been in the UK probably longer than all of us, and I want you to tell us, first of all, take us back to if you have the bit of history, because I have the history, but I want to hear it from someone who may have experienced it. What was it like in the UK to live or to grow up in this environment where black people were not allowed, or were not accepted in the traditional churches, to the point where we had to now go out and create our own churches and start the charismatic movement and the Pentecostal movement in the UK? If you have any recollection, or you know from your parents, Bishop, do you want to tell us a little bit about that history?
Yes,
because I think it still affects quite a lot of us today, and in the way that we do church.
Well, I can remember, as my father was the minister before me. I believe he is the greatest role model for me. He took me to church, and the church van would pick us up, and I had no discussion with him whether me and my sisters were going to church. It was the way of life. We got ourselves ready, the church van would come, and we would go to church. And I thank God, because if it wasn't for that experience and discipline, I don't think I would be where I am today. They were instilling some good, very great principles. So church is my life. Although we're locked out at the moment, it's difficult because it's regimental in my spirit to go to church. Anyhow, my father came from Jamaica in the, I would say, the late 50s coming into the 60s. And he traveled on a boat and left, obviously, my bigger brothers in Jamaica, but came here with an ambition for just 5 years and then to return. But he was a staunch believer and was a pivotal man in the Church of England in Jamaica. So as he came off the boat, it was only one thing. He had to live with cousins for a little while, but he felt it was only right to go into the nearest church, traveling on a boat. Can you imagine leaving the beautiful sunshine island of Jamaica? But because of the instinctiveness of worship and part of how he played a part in his local Church of England church, he went to a Church of England church and thoroughly enjoyed the service, because the liturgy and the set out was very similar, because obviously originated from England, obviously into Jamaica. But my father, hearing the service, did only one thing, which was response and call. As the preacher was preaching, he would say, "Amen. Amen." So at the end of the service, my father got up to go out to the door and to greet the minister and to do what he would normally do if he was in Jamaica, and to tell them, "Thank you very much. Great word, sir." As my father stretched his hand out to the minister to say, "You've preached well, thank you very much," and to explain, "I've come on a long journey, my first service," the minister grabbed my father's hand, pulled him aside and said, "I'm going to tell you something. I prefer you not to come back, because you're frightening the people by saying amen." Now, shock, horror. I'll never forget that, my dad telling me that. The hand was not a hand of welcome. It pulled him aside, and he whispered in his ears and said, "I would prefer you not to come back, because I don't think this is the best place for you, because you're frightening the congregation." My father, remember him telling me that as a youngster and as I got older in ministry, how he felt the biggest rejection from the church that grew him up, the Church of England. So therefore my father felt it difficult to go back, until he began to have church in his front room. And there were other churches, other ministers that come in with the same type of experience, who felt that rejection but couldn't confront it. They were in a strange land.
Yeah.
Until word got around and they met in the front rooms.
Yeah.
That's where
and that's how the Black Pentecostal and Black churches started in the UK. And I think that is important, because I think that division within the church, which is what Pastor Toye was talking about earlier on, starts here, where parents were not welcome in the traditional churches. The split happens, and then there is the white church and the black churches. People are asking today, why is it that there's two different type of churches? Especially, we're talking about the UK, because the US story is a little bit different. But in the UK, the church divided when people came and were not welcome in the traditional churches, and then they had to use front rooms to meet, and that's how the movement started. Today, the churches are still divided, even though a lot of us have integrated other churches, other movements, other Pentecostal movement, other charismatic movement. We still do not mingle as much as we should. And I'm going to take this to Ryan. Is this something that is very something that you've experienced here in the UK, obviously, but is this something that is very divisive also in the US? And is there any way to reconcile that?
I think the reality is that when we talk about the church and the Black church, and the separation between cultures, Black church, white church, whatever church, we're talking about, the same reason why we have initiatives like the BET Awards or Mobile Awards. As you rightly said, a lot of the, the reason why we have these institutions separated from each other is because, of course, we weren't welcome. And so, same here in the United States. Fortunately, when the Black churches started, it was at a time where, Blacks still weren't being allowed to, sit in the front of the bus, and Blacks still weren't allowed to be, to sit at the counter at an eating diner. And so, it wasn't by choice that the Black church started, but really it was by force, because, they wanted to worship together. They wanted to come together and, and express their faith and express their, their love for God, and, have just a fellowship just like the white people had. But unfortunately, again, that wasn't allowed. And so, we had this big divide that ended up becoming what it is today. And so, while some of that is changing, and you see, really, the millennial culture has been breaking down some of those barriers with leaders like Mike Todd, leaders like John Gray, and other such leaders. In fact, there was a period in time, and this was in the UK, where you had, a lot of young Black university students that were going over to churches like Hillsong. Unfortunately, now we've seen, and heard certain things that may indicate that a lot of these institutions really aren't in our corner, yet still we've supported them over the years, from when it comes to the white evangelical TV networks and some of the white evangelical preachers and pastors that we so welcomed into our spaces. Then unfortunately they haven't returned the favor. And so, now we've reached breaking point, and we're really seeing a lot of people's hearts. And, a lot of that has happened since, this current administration came into power about coming up to 4 years ago. A lot of the white evangelical church started leaning their support to this particular candidate, which is in their democratic right. But the challenge that the Christians were having was that they weren't actually speaking to the injustices that a lot of us felt this administration was doing to people of color, in regards to how we were spoken about, in regards to how we were treated and how we were mistreated as well. From him saying that he's refusing to meet with the Black Lives Matter campaign, from him endorsing the whole idea of all lives matter. And so this really is an issue that unfortunately goes way beyond the church. But like I was saying earlier, I really think conversations of healing are going to have to start to take place in order for that bridge to be fixed. And it starts with, like you said earlier, some of these leaders just coming out and saying, we stand with you, we're about it, and we're going to be about it. But I think it's gotten to the point now where talking for us is not enough. We need to see action. We need to see you standing on the front line with us. And that's really what's going to have to take place in order for us to really have some kind of healing and to come back together again.
So coming up to the question of the night, which is, the church has been divided because of the way that we were rejected when it all started, especially in the UK. And that is why today there is white predominant church and black predominant churches. But today we have moved forward, and there's more integration within each side of the churches, more on the white dominated churches. Black people have integrated, and now those churches have a responsibility to their black congregation to take up the issues of social justice, not because it's happening over and across the pond, but because it is at the foundation of the church growth and building in the church here in the UK. The social justice, the racial injustices were at the foundation of the black churches, and therefore when people are coming to the traditional churches, they're coming with wounds, they're coming with stories, they're coming with a broken heart, which should in 2020 be coming to resolution and healing. And I want to take the next question to Pastor Toye, which is when the church, and not only the church, but when the black people across the nations came out with a big outcry that how can it be that in 2020 a man can die on the pavement of a street, and everybody across the world is outraged, and in the UK the church is silent? How do you answer that?
It's, to be honest, I don't even know where to start. For the last week, I've been in a muted position where I'm still processing all I saw in the video and all that's been happening. I think for me, one thing I always, when it comes to the issue of faith, this is my school of thought. This is how I lead. What does the Bible say about this? Does the Bible call this person inferior to me? Does the Bible say to me this person is lesser than I am? Does the Bible say to me that because this person hasn't got as much education as I've got, or this person's skin tone is different from mine, then they are inferior to me? I think we need to begin to hold ourselves accountable for the kind of things we preach. Because you see, you cannot preach love and be a racist. It can't work. Yeah. You cannot be teaching love and be racist, because there is no ground. You will never find any biblical justification for thinking someone is lesser than you are. You would on any ground, you will never find it. And we need to start holding ourselves accountable. And I don't know why I want to kind of hammer on this. I have a big time issue with people being taught stuff, or let me put it this way: instead of you to make mention of something just the way it is, take for instance, most of us can identify with this. To mention the word sex in our home when we were younger, it was like you're calling destruction on yourself. You could get a slap from your parents, you could get whatever. Why? Because there was just this mysterious, sex was just so mystified, and it's led many of us into some kind of issues. And it's the same thing when it comes to the issue of racism, or you being a Christian. You can't be a Christian and be able to be racist at the same time. You're either going to be a Christian or you're going to be racist. You can't match both of them together. Like I said, I think we need to come to a place where we begin to really challenge the stuff that we teach, the things we preach. And even for many of the people we preach to, they need to start becoming real Christians who can come to us and say, listen, you said this and I've said the Bible and it doesn't quite add up. And we need to go back to that, because I just believe it's more of a cultural thing. And when I say cultural, I'm not meaning black and white. I'm talking about the way of life that these people have been taught, they've been raised with, the mentality and the mindset they've been given. And the Bible doesn't come to support your mindset and your mentality and your dysfunction. It comes to actually to take them off you, to review them, to tell you, listen, you're stinky, you're racist, you're talking about love, but you're not walking in love. And this is what love is all about. So I think,
and I think when we talk about love, we need to remember that it is the priority of the church as it's not priority of the church. It is the word of God itself that we cannot love God if we do not love our neighbor. And
absolutely,
going back to my question to you, I was asking you, how come if we love our congregation, if we love our members, if we love the people who come to us on Sunday, how come the church across the UK have not come out to speak about this issue of social justice, even though we know that all of us are carrying wounds and pain from the past?
You know, I think one reason is because when you touch on something as in code huge as racism, you stand to lose certain relationships. You stand to lose certain ties. It's like, I don't know if, I know it's not something that's kind of predominant in the white church, but in the black church, when you begin to touch on the issue of father, spiritual father kind of a thing, you're stepping into a ground where certain people will easily cut you off because okay, you know what it is, but you see, the reason why many people are not talking about this is because they don't want to lose relationship that feeds their belly and fill their pocket. When they begin to eat the nail on the head, they know some of the people that they deal with who got this mindset will begin to turn against them. It's something I've seen over and over. It's something I've seen over and over. When you confront people without any disrespect, say, listen, this is what this thing is. What you've just said or what you just did, this is what it's all about. They're either going to humbly accept the fact that what you said is right and repent, or they're going to turn against you stubbornly and wouldn't want to have anything to do with you. We have, and you see, and the reason why we have that as well is because we have Christians who don't understand their identity. They don't understand their identity. No man has the power to shut your life down. If you tell them the truth, they're either going to take it or not. They can, in some cases, they can kill your body, like with the story of in the case of Judge
talking the truth in love is always very important. Yes. I'm going to take the next question.
Use adjectives to change the word.
I'm going to take the next question to Bishop. When it comes to love and expressing love, we remember that God said that if we really love him, we should love our neighbors. And in your video this week, you decided to step forward and to produce a video that is asking the church to stand up for racial injustice or stand against racial injustice. Do you want to tell us about what pushed you into putting that video together?
Thank you very much. I think it's important that you hear where I'm coming from on this. 17 years ago, a member of the congregation at the time handed me a slip of paper and said, "Bishop, you'll be really good at this." I opened it, and what I saw was inviting individuals to become local magistrates in the area. I looked at her and I laughed. I said, "Me doing that, standing up for justice? I mean, yeah, I'll do that in church, but to sit in the court of law." She said, "You're very good at this, Bishop. Very good. This is what you do all the time." I looked at that piece of paper and I thought, okay. And I applied. 2 years later, I was sworn in as a local magistrate. 3 things I've always asked God for, and it leads on, and you need to hear the foundation. 3 things I've always asked for in leading God's church. I said, "Please, God, give me wisdom, knowledge, and understanding." Those are always the 3 things. Even before I stepped into the judiciary. 3 things: wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. When I got into the judiciary, it taught me a lot of things because I was able to see there and then injustice. I knew I had the power, along with my colleagues, with my guidelines, to come to the right solution and be fair to ensure we gave the correct sentences according to the guidelines of the country. I felt empowered, and I couldn't have abused it because I was trained along with my colleagues. And then I remembered in the early days, those are the things I've always asked God for: wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And so, personally, for me, serving on the bench for 14 years, It's always been innate that if I see injustice, I want to correct it immediately. I've also empowered the church, not the establishment. The Bible says we are the ecclesia, the called out. Yeah. So therefore, it's for the body of Christ to embody and empower the ecclesia, that we don't have to wait in a sense. I believe in order, and I'm from that. But if we've empowered the people we've served to know that they are the church, every time they see injustice, they will automatically move to make sure they apply injustice. Let me say that again. They will imply justice if they see injustice, excuse me. But they need to be empowered. We've got massive organizations that have to wait for a committee before they can do anything. And they wait for the committee to sign papers, get everybody in the room. At that time, they've got the idea, they've got the will, but they're not moving out because maybe they want to cross the I's, cross the T's and dot the I's to make sure that when that statement goes out, it's politically correct. And so that's the delay. Why we don't see churches coming forward, because they're thinking if we react too quickly, it's going to blow up in our faces. Or if I react in an angry state that I'm in, it's going to come out different. And then I'll have to have a political statement or some statement to correct the way I was thinking.
So you are saying that the church has not been quick to respond to what has happened in America and has affected the people across in the UK because they are fearful of how they would be perceived?
Yes, and again, the reason that is as well, they are not sure who is the voice. They are not sure who is the one to step forward. They may say, let me say something, but I'm inadequate. I shouldn't say anything. And so we're like, waiting, are you coming? And this goes on. What we need to do is empower people. That means if you see something that has gone wrong and you see something that's injustice, something that's totally out of the box, you don't have to wait for a committee. Not if you have the love of God, you've been empowered, you deal with it. You go out there and says, according to what I've been taught, this is according to how I've been raised, how to rightly divide the word of God. I like the Levi or the priest that walks across the other side and say, you know what? I've got to go and get this signed off first before I make any inroads to that. Or this is not what I should be doing.
And we go back to what Pastor Toye was saying, which is we have not taught the church or each member of the church to take responsibility for the injustice that is happening in the world. Do you agree with what Pastor Toye said?
Exactly what and it's down to leaders in their churches. And that's what I do. I know who I am. And therefore, if it's injustice, I have to correct those matters with justice. We don't sit down and watch somebody dying and think, oh my God, they did die, but it's not for me to get in there and do anything about it. We all have responsibility to shout against something that is wrong. If not, if our spirit, therefore, is now supporting what's gone on. So we don't need to wait for a committee when something wrong. As the body of Christ, as Christians, we have a voice.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to go back to Ryan and what is happening in the US. We've all seen the beautiful speech of Tamika de Mallory, the young lady activist who spoke directly to the police and to the nation from Minneapolis. And one of the things that she was calling for was not only the education of the church, but she was calling for national companies and industries to be involved in this fight for racial justice. And I'm bringing this to you because being involved in the music industry, I want to know from your point of view, what, and bringing this to the gospel industry, what do you think should happen when it comes to gospel music and the gospel industry or Christian music should happen when it comes to social justice?
I think gospel artists, just as Christians, and this doesn't go just for gospel artists, this is any type of faith-based music artist, period, because sometimes we like to separate the idea of gospel from, of course, Christian music, which is more
Yeah.
so the CCM side. So whether you're doing gospel or CCM, whatever type of music you're doing, if you are involved in Christian music and if you are a Christian, at the core, you should care about justice. And so I think the onus is going to really be on a lot of these CCM artists to take a stand and say, hey, listen, as much as, we might not be, gospel artists, or we might not sing in black churches all the time, but the reality is a lot of black people are the ones that are supporting you, from the Matt Redmans to the Darlene Checks to the Tim Hughes to the Bethel Music. A lot of the audiences are people of color. And so I think gospel artists, CCM artists have a huge responsibility to be a voice at this time and to say, hey, listen, we don't stand up for this. I think the challenge is that a lot of them are going to end up on the wrong side of history because of the nature of their some of their political views that some of them have made known to us, from artists like Vicky O, where they stand with particular issues on politics and issues related to black folks. I don't know we're going to see it from everyone that we want to see it from, but it's absolutely imperative for them to use their voice right now, gospel artists alike, Christian artists alike, and say, hey, listen, we've seen what's going on and we stand with you. Sometimes it's not always about getting all the answers right. A lot of these artists have relationships. Matt Redman has a relationship with Tasha Cobbs. Kurt Franklin just did a record for King and Country. These are two artists from two separate worlds. And so sometimes it might just be picking up the phone and having a conversation with Kirk and saying, hey, Kirk, listen, I see what's going on. How can we use our platform to support you, brother? How can we use our platform to help you? It might take a Matt Redman calling Tasha Cobbs and saying, Tasha, listen, we've seen what's going on in your world, and we are not outside of it looking in. We want to be on the inside with you, fighting for the cause, but we want to know how best to do it. And so a lot of this is going to start with actually being able to have the courage to pick up the conversation and saying, I don't have the answers, but my heart is in this to help. How can we be a part of this? And so having these conversations like what you're doing tonight, with us talking about this and other churches and leaders speaking up, a lot of it's going to start with a conversation. But you have to have the courage to say, hey, listen, I don't really know how to fix this, but my heart is there. And so, and as a Christian, like I said, the Bible talks about justice in Isaiah chapter 1. It says you should do good, seek justice. And it also says that you should correct oppression. Okay. And so, seeing the oppression of black people, as a Christian, you have a responsibility to correct this. A lot of people feel like, well, I'm called to preach, I'm called to sing, I'm not called to be on the front line or to protest. But the reality is, forget about whether you sing or you preach. If you are a Christian, you ought to have a heart for the people that are oppressed. And so you can't be out here giving to charities and doing all this wonderful work and then ignore the charity in your own backyard that is the oppression and the injustice happening against the people that have upheld your ministry to this day. So a lot of it is going to have to, again, start with having an open heart and having a conversation.
What should then? I was reading one of your posts this week when you were challenging the church members in general, the church itself, to take on those labels and to take on those artists and to say to them, it is time for you to bridge the gap, because we are in the midst of you. We are inside this church system, and you cannot just be doing music for one sector of the industry or one sector of the church and leaving another. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, just in regards to what I said. So, the post I put out was really calling out the fact that a lot of these institutions haven't really shown much support for black people over the years. We saw a situation just last year where Kurt Franklin was very vocal and spoke about, the fact that he was actually boycotting TBN. A lot of people were surprised about it, but he had been on TBN's platform a couple of times speaking about racial injustice, and they decided to cut out his speech. 2 times in a row they did this, and so he said, I'm not going to stand for it no more. I'm going to take a stand. And so over the years, again, like we've seen these institutions ignore our issues. We've seen them disregard our calls for justice and fail to stand with us. But the reality is, like I said, this is a turning point right now because, as much police brutality has been happening, there is something different about this case that has woken up a different animal. And it's either you're going to be on the right side of history and stand with us, or you're going to be on the wrong side. And whatever you do in these moments is going to be critical moving forward. And so, I would advise them, I would advise these white majority Christian-owned institutions to, take a stand and say, hey, listen, we we're with you and we support you. I mean, we've seen Nike, we've seen Netflix, we've seen ITV in the United Kingdom. All of them have made statements to Black Lives Matter, but we have not seen one major white-owned Christian institution in America. We've seen Hillsong, but we have not seen a TBN. We have not seen a Word Network, which, by the way, is white-owned, even though they class themselves as African-American.
Wow. Okay. I wasn't even sure.
We have not seen any of those Christian networks that Black preachers pay so much money to, and really are the ones that keep them on there, say anything about this issue. And so in order for them to really, to be able to, like I said, be on the right side of history, something is going to have to shift, and it's going to have to start again, like I said, with being willing to have a conversation and say, you know what, we've got it wrong. Our hearts aren't in the right place. And, you know, you might need to repent, you know what I mean? And say, hey, I want to make this right, you know, but it's going to take having the heart to do that in order for things to be able to move forward.
But I think we also need to take responsibility in the sense that we've all, because of the way that we were brought up to not challenge authority, not challenge the white man. It was not done. I think Bishop can relate to that. You just, you didn't confront the enemy. You were told, keep it quiet. We know it's happening. Just, you know, make yourself small. We're just going to go by. And I was seeing on Facebook today that a young lady was holding a placard and she was saying, we are not our ancestors and we are not our grandparents. We will do you. And I think even though her message was violent and that was the only thing that she could say to express her anger, the essence of what she wanted to say is very poignant, which is the way that we were doing it before is not going to work tomorrow. This new generation is not going to be as easily led the way that it was before, and it's going to require the major companies, the major labels, the major music singers and performers to straighten up and to now stand up and to show that they are willing to accept us and to work with us generally. And what do you think, and when it comes to the young people's mindset, because you're very much into this culture, what do you think is going through their mind right now? They're rioting, they're looting, and nobody's saying it's the right thing, but I think they just don't know how to express their anger.
I think it's that the riots are the cry of the unheard, you know, and so whilst a lot of people don't like the idea of people looting and destroying businesses, and I'm not condoning anything, I don't really want to get into that side of things, but I do understand that, like I said earlier in the conversation, the heart that is behind it. I think a lot of these disillusioned millennials are really looking for leadership. They're looking for leadership from the church. They're looking for leadership in government. And for years, they've asked for this and it has not happened. They have not gotten their answers to the questions. They have not gotten people, you know, particularly black millennials that I'm referring to, have not gotten the attention that they deserve. And so we're seeing now the tipping point where things are now boiling over and becoming absolutely reckless, and we don't know really how long this is going to last for. But what it's really going to take is, like I said, leadership from people in power, and leadership from a lot of these people that young people spend so much time investing into, you know, whether you're talking about the Oprah Winfrey's or whether you're talking about the Bishop Jakes, who has, you know, has been very vocal about his disdain for this issue. Yes, he has, yeah. But I think it's really going to take, again, a lot of the people that millennials have flocked to over the years to stand on the front line and say, listen, young people, like this is the way forward. But I don't think we've seen a great example of leadership and taking charge of the situation. And so we've ended up with just a reckless movement where we have different people on different sides of the fence. And so it's actually divided our own house. And, you know, a house divided can never stand. And so I think in order for us to emerge from the ashes and rise up out of this situation, it's really going to take people that call themselves leaders and people that call themselves influencers, I guess is the new word for leaders these days. It's really going to take these influencers to come together and say, hey, this is how we're going to strategize. This is how we're going to move forward. For example, today we had this blackout on social media. which is more like a solidarity, I guess, simple to kind of show everyone that we're standing together. But the question that I think we need to ask ourselves is that if it was not for social media, how would we deal with the situation? How would we protest? How would we use our voices? Because putting up a post is great because I did so today too. It expresses your solidarity. But again, if social media did not exist, what actions would we take to address this issue? And I think those are some of the strategies that we really have to focus on in order to affect change. Because again, Trump ain't listening to what you're saying on social media. He's on Twitter all day himself, so that means nothing to him. So the reality is we're going to have to come up with something greater than what we've been doing in order to move forward. And it's really going to take leadership, like I said.
Leadership in the UK, leadership in America. I'm going to take my next question to Bishop for this question, which is, what's next for leadership? What are we going to teach these young millennials? Because we can't continue to do church as it has always been, seeing it has not been successful, and they are feeling frustrated, they are feeling unheard, and they are leaving the heart of the church. What can we do to lead them in the path of righteousness?
Okay, I think it's important. Most leaders don't talk about succession. When I say succession, that means preparing the young to take over.
Yeah.
Like in my days, I remember one minister said that he would not leave the church to anybody, he'll die with him. I believe if leaders had a succession plan in place where he would look at a young lady or a young man with promise and destiny and purpose and begin to prepare for the future, I believe our young millennials would feel they're a part of something for the future. Most pastors and bishops, leaders, do not discuss a succession plan. So you don't leave any hope, and you certainly won't leave any legacy. And so therefore, people can feel very frustrated, and the young people as well. And we've got to understand what worked for us now might not work for us over there. And so we've got to begin to learn to let go the reins and understand that we are in a different time and dispensation. Now, if there were more ministers planning succession, putting people in positions where they're shadowing us, we're teaching them and telling them, I can see something will happen great for you in the future. The Elisha situation, waiting, learning, watching. The Moses situation with Joshua. If there were more successions, and I can ask a lot of pastors, who do you think will take over when you're gone? Are you preparing them? Are you allowing them to bring in the social media that you may not understand to bring the ministry to the next level? We are leaving them out of that conversation. And if you leave them out of that conversation, they might pick up that conversation somewhere else because we're not factoring them in for the future of the church, which will be completely different in another, 5-10 years' time. Have we got a succession plan? In scripture, it was always. You do that, you'll find our millenniums will be very, very supportive, and they will think they've got a promise. They've got something to look forward to, and they will become more valuable because now they know they could be the next man and woman for the next voyage for the ministry. Succession planning.
Succession planning. Pastor Toye, what do you think leaders should do to kind of reconcile the hurts? Because we've talked about the hurts of the past, but we're also talking about this hurt that's just happened, seeing another Black man being killed on the sidewalk of the street. What can the leaders do to bring healing to the people? We've been carrying this for a long time. It is time for us to come together and to find a way to bring healing to the congregation. What can you say to the leaders?
Well, thank you very much. What I will say is we need to go back to the basics. We need to stop all these egocentric ministries that we're building that are not fulfilling the purpose for which Christ instituted the church. I see a lot of events, I see a lot of conferences, I see a lot of this and that. And one of the challenges I had for many years, and the questions I was asking God when I knew God will have me pastor a church, is for what reason? Why do I have to go pastor a church? Why should I start a church? Because I see a lot of empires being built.
Yeah.
And the empires exist for the leaders. You see, to be honest, I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. And I'm so grateful that Bishop mentioned, touched on the issue of the millennials. The very same thing Jesus taught in the Bible is still the very same thing we have to teach millennials. The challenge is a lot of our churches are empires for the leaders. They are not homes for the hurting. And as long as we keep doing church, building a church around a man, building a church around a particular leader and all that, we're just wasting our time. I don't care what you preach. I'm not looking for your intelligence. I'm looking for a home. When I find a home, every other thing will make sense. A lot of these young folks, they don't see a lot of our churches as homes because most of us leaders are hypocrites. And it's a decision we made. It's not a demonic attack on our character because of what we want to get for ourselves. We need to stop all this rubbish. We need to stop building empires and putting up conferences to facilitate our network with people, but the meetings or whatever is not really blessing the people. We need to stop it. You pastor a church in the United Kingdom for how many years? You're going to have a conference. All your preachers, everybody who ministers, all your guests, they come from outside of town. Are you not raising men? What's happening to the people you're calling sons? But a lot of them are not your sons. They're your toys.
Bishop wants to come in on this one. Bishop wants to come on? Yes, sir.
You've made a great point here. Absolutely excellent. Here's the next thing. Now, our preachers are now pastors. You may ask, what does that mean? Our pastors, our preachers were flying all over the world, and I don't envy them because maybe they have global ministries. But I do believe, this is what I believe, many of those global pastors, and I don't apologize for that, they travel, and maybe because they're sought after, and they go, and that's maybe the calling on their lives. But I do believe many of those that are left behind have great gifts, massive gifts. But now I believe the pastors are not able to fly around anymore. The preachers, they have to stay home. And now I'm noticing, wow, I didn't know that this young lady had this gift. Oh, wow, because they're at home.
Yeah.
I do believe that we need to seize the opportunity because this shutdown has caused us, and I'm going to tell you this now, there are people in the ministry that the Lord has afforded me to be over. The people's gift have moved to the next level because now bishop and pastor are on the same, because we're pastoring the church in a different way that we've never pastored before. And now you're saying, you know what? That gift that you got is amazing. I now let us run in our proper lanes. But maybe we're flying all over the place because we would have seen it. This is a wake-up call that now we appreciate the men and the women of God that have been serving under us. We never saw them in that light so often because we were never here. Yeah. I guarantee you, many past preachers are now beginning to see the value of the pastors and the leaders that they had in a different light. Home. It's no different from raising a child. They want to see father. They want to see mom. But if father and mom's all over the place, the child is at home fending for itself, doing exactly what they think father and mother wants. This is a big wake-up. So you're right, Pastor. It's exactly what's happening. Preachers now are now pastoring the church, and they should be. They should be taking care of God. So something change. Something's going to change out of this lot. Trust me.
It will.
Things are going to change.
Going forward, how would you then, and I'm going back to Orion here, how would you then say that we should address or speak to power about this racial injustice?
I think there's two things that have to happen. I think one of the things that we need to do as the Black diaspora around the world is we first need to focus on building an economic base. I think that is something that we are currently lacking and something that we don't pay enough attention to. The reality is voting matters, yes. Protesting matters, yes. What is happening now is being heard and seen, and that is an important part of the process of change. First of all, you have to make it known that you want change, and so that is what we're seeing right now. But then the next step is building an economic base, because the reality is this: as much as votes matter, once these politicians get in power, if you haven't economically kind of supported that process, they really have no obligation to listen to any of your demands. And so that's why we see a lot of politicians that will go to churches during the campaign trail, and they will come to, the mayor of London will come to the major churches in London and say, I want to do this, I want to do that. And they get in power, we never hear from them. And so we have to start putting up our money where our mouth is, because in order to really affect change, we know, like the saying goes, money makes the world go round. And so we need to focus on building an economic base so that we can, first of all, thrive within our own community and be self-dependent as Black people internationally. And secondly, so we can start putting money behind these politicians and putting money behind these campaigns and saying, hey, listen, this is what we want in exchange for our community. For our dollar, this is what we want you to do. This is what the changes that we want to see. The second thing that I think has to happen before we can really start having a voice in terms of speaking truth to power is we need to really focus on repairing our relationship with Africa as Black people around the world. I think that our relationship with Africa was, of course, it was broken due to white supremacy in the first place. But the challenge that we have now is that around the world, white Black people have no singular voice in power that has willpower that will speak on our behalf when injustices happen. And so you have, in China or in Asia, whatever, in India, you will have those politicians in power that will speak up for the injustices of the international diaspora that come from their nation, whether or not they were born or lived there. Just the fact that they're a part of that community. You will have you go to LA, you go to London, you go to NYC, you see a Chinatown. There's a reason for that. And I think in order for us to have a global voice, we really need to start repairing and investing back into where we come from. I'm African Caribbean. A lot of people here are African American. It starts first with being African. And so in order for us to really, to have some kind of voice of power, the reality is the UK government is not going to speak on our behalf. The US government is not going to speak on our behalf. And so we need to have someone somewhere in the world that says, hey, you can't treat our people like this, because if you do, this is going to happen. But unfortunately now there is no consequence. There's no economical consequence for white supremacy. We'll boycott for a day or a week, and then we're back in the Gucci store, we're back in Target, or we're back at wherever we boycotted. And so we really, in order to have a long-term strategy, have to really focus on building those economics and investing in a nation or investing in a continent that is going to speak up for our problems and speak on our behalf.
I saw today that the Chinese were speaking against racial injustice themselves and are asking the US to take action, which is quite funny. But they were trying to defend their position in Africa, in the sense that China has been investing quite a lot in Africa. Pastor Toye, I just want to come to you, because this event happened in Nigeria, where Nigeria and South Africa, where they were celebrating the investment of the Chinese. How do you feel about having other nations speaking into our issue of racial injustice?
Well, I think China is just a joke. They're very laughable. To even have to say something about it, they should shut up. They have no credibility to do that. Now, everyone who knows China knows that, they don't put money somewhere for them to get token back from it, or for you to just give them back. They're looking for you. They're looking for your land. Anyone could go and make the research. Most of the African countries they're going to and lending to, part of the deal that they're striking with a lot of these people is, okay, if you haven't got the money to give to us, give us this part of your nation, or give us this part of your land, and we'll establish your stuff there. We'll do this and this and this and that. It's a takeover strategy. Let me put it that it's a takeover strategy from China. We give you money, you give them. The truth is, anyone who understands the importance of both knows that, listen, if I give you money, and if I give you money, you give me your land. You're giving me a strong foothold in your country, in your land, to rule and to reign. So it's scary, because I had this conversation with a couple of people about a couple of weeks ago as well, and from the things we're seeing, from the handwritings on the wall, it is scary. This guy is
what I want to come to. What I want to come to when I'm talking about investment from other countries is the fact that the church has an economic power that we are not using, apart from buying jet and extending our footyard in warehouses. We're not doing much, and if we're doing something, we're just doing mission work where we send some secondhand clothes and a few bags of rice. But I think there is a strategy, an economic strategy that the church should be looking at in terms of investing in Africa, so that we can have that, like Ryan said, an economic foothold in Africa, and be able to use that foothold as leverage to put pressure on the European government.
Yeah, well, you see, to be honest with you, I know a number of meetings in Nigeria, especially, that are doing this. They've been doing it for years. The challenge we have is, at the same time, is our people don't understand the language of patience. They want it now. They want it now. You don't give it to me now, they fight you. They believe you have anything for them, and they move on. So we need to also deal with this mentality of, if I don't get it now, then that's the end of the story. It's going to take time. We didn't get here in a week or a month. So we need to understand that while a few people have been doing it, and they're actively doing it, teaching people about investment and ensuring they're investing right and all the stuff, it's going to take a bit of time. We need to get more people on board. And our people should understand, if you didn't get here in a week, you're not going to get out of it in a week. That's it.
Yeah. Well, the absence of justice is what started all of this. And there has been calls for bloodshed. It has been said that Trump is trying to start a race war, and I hope it is not true. And we have seen the UK respond quietly, especially when it comes to the church response to racial injustice. And it has caused a lot of people to question whether the church overall, whether black majority or white majority church, were interested in their members. And today this conversation was very fruitful in the sense that we have been able to dig a little bit more in what has caused this silence and what should be done when it comes to dealing with the millennials rioting and looting, not only just in the US, but even if it was to happen here. And then we spoke about the future of what the church should be looking at in terms of leadership when it comes to the millennials, but also leadership when it comes to investing in Africa, so that we would have financial power to be able to influence governments or Western governments, so that they will be listening to our voices. But before we move on to, before we come to the end of the show, I wanted to ask one more question to Bishop, which is, the people have been hurt by the silence of the church. And I want to know whether you have a word of comfort for them tonight.
They have been hurt by the silence of the church. I missed a little bit when you said, I think the internet went. Could you just repeat that again so I make sure I can answer you exactly?
The body of Christ have been hurt by what has happened across the pond. And with the riot and looting of the young people, we have found solutions and given them words of encouragement as to what we should be looking forward to in the future. But tonight we realize that even though we've touched on a lot of things, that the main point of the conversation is to speak to the people about the silence that they feel the church has kept over the last week by not addressing not only the hurt, but the wounds of the past that have been reopened with this event.
What has happened, why the silence has been for a week, it's because I believe many of the leaders themselves can't believe what they saw. They're coming to terms with it as well as human beings. And so they want to make sure that when they do react or do say something, they will say things that will have strength behind it and with clarity. And they won't say anything of the heat of the moment. And I think it's always good in life that before we react, we step back a little bit, pause, evaluate. All I can say to anyone who felt that the church hadn't spoken up in time is we apologize. It was not meant to be so. We as the church, when we see any injustice, we deal with it immediately, just like you would deal with anything out of the ordinary in your own household, you will deal with. But this being on a global scale took time to really look into and to come to a conclusion that when I do make that statement, I've got every single fact in place. So that's the only thing I can say at this current moment, to apologize if they felt that we were slow in coming forward. But as I did a Bible study and just finished it, I told them that as the church is me, is you. And so therefore, if we see any injustice whatsoever, we shouldn't have to wait for a committee. Wrong is wrong, right is right. And if we've got good morals, we should use those good morals to address the injustice.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you so much, Bishop. I just have one more question, and that one is to Ryan. We've talked about economic power and what the church can do. Can the church get together and, as leaders, create a fund to fight racial injustice in the UK? And when it happens, like George Floyd, we can, from the UK, hire lawyers or help the families in whichever country it is to bring racial justice.
I think that's an excellent idea, and I think that is something that would be of a great help just to the wider community as it relates to addressing these issues of police brutality and injustices against, people of color. I think the challenge, of course, is that we see even today that there is a lot of, I think Pastor mentioned it earlier in regards to the division and sort of the ego-centric churches. And so I think that part of the challenge with creating that would be a lot of churches would have to really put down that ego and stop fighting about who's got the largest church, who's got the best building, and who's got the most members. But actually decide to be the church and say, hey, listen, we are all different parts of the body of Christ. And, this is our assignment. And so I think, again, it's going to have to take some conversations happening, because I think there is, still some division, like I said, amongst our own house. And of course, a divided house cannot stand. So I think that's an excellent idea. But I do think it's definitely going to have to take some readjusting of some mindsets in regards to how we view each other. You know what I mean? And so even the church leaders themselves will have to do some reevaluating and say, hey, well, how can we address these issues and how can we move forward? I think the challenge that I would put forward to a lot of church leaders is asking themselves the very important and potent question in that if you were to shut down today, would your local community really care? And I think that is a very important reflection for leaders to be able to look at how they're impacting their local. Because whilst this is a global issue, I think the reality is change starts locally, right? And so if you're not affecting change in your local community as a church, the question really has to be, are you fulfilling your purpose? How do the young people feel about your church? What are you doing on a day-to-day basis to not necessarily always win souls, but just to reach out to people, just to show love to people? You know what I mean? There's a church out here in Atlanta, every single Saturday since the beginning of COVID, they have been feeding 1,000 families through just a drive-through. They've been pulling up to the church. They, you knock on, they knock on your boot. You open up the boot. They fill it with groceries, and you drive off. you know, and there's a lot of churches doing that, similar things in the UK. I've seen, you know, I remember there was a local Redeemed church around where I used to live. Every Saturday they were out feeding the community and doing things to help, you know, people in the local area. And so I really think it's going to take a change of mindsets. But you know, just to your point, I think in order for that coming together to happen, you know, there's going to have to be, you know, some conversations, and egos are going to have to be put down and say, you know what, enough is enough fighting each other, enough trying to compete with each other. Let's move forward for the good of the greater community, and and put something together that's going to work for pushing this issue forward and past where it needs to be.
Yes, thank you so much, Ryan. Pastor Toye, last word on the issue. What do you think the church can do to moving forward to bring a reconciliation?
Well, we need to reconcile within ourselves first. We need to drop our egos, drop our pride, and begin to gravitate towards one another. We need to break the barriers of tribalism that exist in the UK church as well. There's no that is better than the other, as long as it's the Church of Christ. It needs to start within before we take it out. When we heal well within, it becomes strength and power to reach out to a society as well and begin to infect them with healing. So let's start from within. Let the churches, let the pastors, let the ministry heads begin to sit down and reconcile for real. Not professional reconciliation, biblical reconciliation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Bishop, last word on this. What is the way forward?
I like everything that everybody has said. Absolutely right. Before the COVID and the lockdown, many churches had different priorities. At this moment, it would seem everybody has different priorities. They do this, everybody. But what I've heard these gentlemen have lovely put together is now everybody's on the same agenda, on the same playing field. If you had 40,000 in your church, the other person had 40 people, you're on the same playing field. And they're doing the same thing. Now doing 95% of what we were meant to be doing from day one when we were called into ministry, which was to be salt and light, dealing with our community. Every church now is moving in that way, and that's how God intended it to be in the beginning. So you're right. I do believe those discussions now can be had where egos are put to the floor now, and we start thinking about our communities working together, because we're not getting in a plane for now, for soon to travel. We're going to have to preach where we are. That's the point. Those things change. You're not preaching anywhere overseas. You can't do it. You've got to make sure you deal with your home. And that means it might mean collaboration, working together, because we're all in COVID together. So you can't show off from me. Yes, sir. I certainly can't show off from you. We're in it together.
Yep. Oh.
Right. Where's the Reverend?
Okay.
I remember the days used to people when I used to travel overseas, people used to ask me, how many people do you have in your church? And they were so happy to say that I've got 50,000, I've got 5,000. I didn't have that many people in my ministry. But now we're all in the same playing field.
Yeah.
We've got ministries, but we can't fill them anymore.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I want to say thank you to Pastor Toye from our church in Milton Keynes. Thank you, Ryan, from all the way in Atlanta. Thank you, Bishop, from our Christian Center in our Christian Church in London. Thank you all for your time and for looking into the issues of the church. You have been wonderful. We will see if, looking at the questions that will be coming after this has been broadcast, what people will say and what they want to do. And if we need to do a part 2, let's see. But thank you so much for your time. It is quite late now. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for being on this show. I appreciate your presence. Thank you very, very much. Well, we're coming to the end of Roundtable, or the exclusive talk into Speak to Injustice. And I want to thank you all for watching. Thank you for joining. Thank you for being with us this night, and for staying with us until the end of this program. You are more than welcome to watch again and replay. Please make sure you share to your friends and to your relatives, to make sure that they hear a word of consolation, especially at this time when people feel that the church has not been present and the church has not been with them. I thank you so much for watching. See you on Saturday for another Roundtable. As I said to you, I will have another special guest on my show on Saturday, and this time I will be in the studio, so make sure you turn up and that you tune in. Well, it's come to the end. Thank you, everybody. See you. Goodbye. Take care of yourself. See you next week.
Bye.